Hello, everyone. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by Limra's Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatsky. I'm glad you're with us today. When most of us think about getting ready for retirement, we picture spreadsheets, calculators, maybe sitting down with a financial advisor, but checking out an illustrated guide, that probably doesn't make your list. My guest today says that might be exactly what makes his latest project so powerful and so effective. Joining me today is nationally renowned retirement author and researcher Steve Vernon. He is the brains behind Retirement Illustrated, a new visually driven guide designed to help people understand and act on the most important retirement decisions they will ever make. Steve is no stranger to this show, but before he joins us, let me just tell you a little bit more about him. He built a career providing trusted, unbiased guidance on the most challenging financial, health, and lifestyle decisions for retirement. As president of Rest of Life Communications, he conducts retirement planning workshops and financial education campaigns. He has published 6 books on retirement planning. The most recent, Don't Go Broke in Retirement, something we should all be looking to read. And for 9 years, Steve was a consulting research scholar at the Stanford Center on Longevity, where he conducted research on retirement income strategies and decision making. You may also have seen his work on Forbes.com, where he writes about key retirement issues. Steve, welcome to the show.
Gene, thanks for having me back again. It's a pleasure.
It is always great to see you. When people think about resources that can help prepare them for retirement, as I said in the intro, they think of books. Maybe they think of sitting down with a financial advisor. Sometimes these days they think about using online tools. You've come up with something totally different. It's an illustrated guide. What prompted you to do this and do it this way?
Well, Gene, that's a great question. Is that people approaching retirement and retirees, they face a bewildering set of decisions. And I've seen people struggle with this. They get overwhelmed and intimidated. Um, and the problem with this is that these decisions are more complex than when they were just saving for retirement. And many times you don't get any do-overs. And so what I wanted to do is create something that was more approachable, and also break it down into bite-sized chunks. So what we did is we thought a visual guide would be more interesting, and approachable. Each chapter contains about 4 to 6 illustrations, and it introduces just a few key ideas and strategies, and you can read it in under 5 minutes. Um, if you're interested and you have more time, there are links to conventional articles that I've written that give more ideas and more details. That might be a 10 to 15 minute read. So I like to say you can snack on this. You don't need to bite off a whole, or even eat a whole meal. It's just something you can browse easily.
I love that, especially with the attention spans that have gotten so much shorter in our country recently. But what is it about visual? I mean, they look kind of like comic books. It's an illustrated story-based format. What are the visuals and the fact that you've got characters that we meet again and again accomplish that other materials might lack?
Well, Gene, when you think about it, a lot of people are visual learners, and often they're more motivated by emotional concept than numbers, and they remember pictures and emotional concepts better than numbers. And I'm a numbers guy. That was a sobering lesson for me. But what our research is showing at the Stanford Center on Longevity, and I can talk about that, is that stories can actually be more memorable. They can inform readers, and really, what I want to do is bring them into these topics, and then I provide links to more detailed information. So I'm trying to motivate them first, but also give them the main ideas. Often in text, the main ideas get buried in a lot of text, and it's hard to pick out what's most important. So the most important ideas and strategies are in the illustrations, and then if you want, you can click on some links and get more information.
Tell me about your research on story-driven learning and why that's so memorable.
Okay. Well, when I was at the Stanford Center on Longevity, I met Dr. Jennifer Aker. She's a professor at the business school. And she emphasized the power of telling stories in a business setting. Um, and her research was showing that the characters really need to be relatable to the viewers. They need to be like them so they can identify them with them. And so that insight really inspired Retirement Illustrated. It inspired the storytelling and the characters that we introduce. The
It
other thing, well, if I can say, I met
Sure.
another professor at the School of Education, and he was talking about the power of making affirmations for important behavior changes. And he was actually doing research in school settings, helping underprivileged children be better school performers. And
By
so
getting
in the
them to say that they would do something or
well,
repeat that they could do it?
right, or to say what their goals are or something about them. In this case, I'm a responsible planner, so he was showing that if they had these very powerful statements about their goals and who they are, that actually could influence their behavior. And I thought, well, if this works for underprivileged kids, it could work for adults who are struggling with retirement. So along the way, Retirement Illustrated has some of the characters expressing affirmations about what's important to them.
Clearly, those were a couple of things that you learned from your time at Stanford that helped shape this entire product. Were there particular lessons that you learned that informed the stories that you wanted to tell?
Well, yes. For example, the Center on Longevity just brought in attention that really people should be planning for a long retirement. We have people living longer lives, living 20 to 30 years. That's what makes some of the retirement planning so complex, is that you are planning for a long period of time. So that's really one of the most powerful lessons or insights that I gained at the center. Um, because of those longer lives, a lot of my research was on generating retirement income strategies. Back when I was doing this this is more than 10 years ago, I was doing this research. There just wasn't a lot of research at that time on retirement income strategies. And so we got that going there. Um, the other thing, though, that one of our studies one of the last studies where we showed how people make decisions. And it clearly illustrated that people have trouble envisioning and planning for these longer lives. And so I wanted to help people develop a picture, how they wanted to be. And what that can do is motivate them to plan differently. And what we found is there's almost a universal desire for peace of mind,
Mm.
having flexibility and control of your lives. And most importantly, the people we surveyed say, I want help. I need help. They were clearly saying that. And so hearing that, almost a plea for help in the surveys, made me motivated to be able to work with them in a way that they'll relate to.
Let's dig into the specifics of the guide a little bit. It follows several pre-retirees and retirees, and you take them through some of the key decisions that retirees are faced with. Can you introduce us to some of your characters and maybe some of the crossroads that they're facing that'll feel familiar to the folks who are watching this show?
Right, exactly. So sure. The opening chapter actually shows four hikers named Bob, Jim, Jack, and Michael. And actually, I got to tell you, I was inspired with this because my brother goes hiking a lot, and they talk a lot with themselves. And so that was my inspiration for starting with four hikers. And they're discussing when to retire, which is the most important decision for many people. And in these characters, Jim and Jack are retired. Jim has done a lot of planning, so he's kind of the role model for the right thing to do. Whereas Jack was forced out with a buyout, so he's playing catch up. And so a lot of people can relate to being forced out through buyouts. Bob, he wants to retire, but he's really worried if he has enough money, which is, of course, a very common worry. And then finally, Michael never wants to retire. He likes his work. He's single, so he gets a lot of social engagement there. And his strategy is just to work forever, which is a misconception. So right away in chapter 1, I'm addressing the most important decision for most people and one common misconception. But then early on, I introduced Liz, Jenny, and Stacy, who are the wives of Bob, Jim, and Jack. And so right away, I wanted to bring in their wives so that they can be expressing their concerns. And then finally, for comic relief, I have Buddy the dog. You know,
We always have to have a dog.
well, right. And so actually, I've written a couple of my favorite posts at Forbes and CBS Money Watch as retirement planning tips from your dog. So I was able to have Buddy give us some of his tips.
I,
So
I
I'm running it through the characters that are bringing up to make it very engaging.
One of the things that you've stressed over the years as we've talked is that delaying Social Security can be one of the most powerful retirement income decisions that many people make. The New York Times once again wrote about this just recently, pointing out the fact that many people do not delay
Yeah.
as long as possible. How does Retirement Illustrated help people weigh that choice?
Well, there's a chapter where the hikers are having coffee after their hike. And Jim, you remember, he's the retiree who did a lot of planning. He shares his thinking about the advantages of Social Security. You know, it's lifetime income, it's increased for inflation, won't go down if the stock market crashes. So he kind of ticks those off. And he says that he delayed collecting Social Security until age 68. Now, that's not all, 70 is the most optimal age for most people, but that's hard for people to do. So I wanted to show kind of a compromise between starting it early and waiting all the way till age 70. Um, so he's just sharing his thinking. And the waitress overhears this conversation and says, "Oh, I'm never going to get Social Security. It's going bankrupt." Well, this gave me an opportunity to address this common misconception in a story format. And it's again sobering for me that people remember pictures rather than me telling them just, "Hey, you ought to delay take Social Security." You know, seeing someone that's relatable to them in a picture format will help them remember that better.
Yeah, it's also a big reminder that retirement planning is about much more than investments, right? Retirement planning is about life. What decisions do you highlight in Retirement Illustrated as having the most significant impact on our long-term financial security and our long-term quality of life?
Okay, glad you asked that. And I'll go through two decisions and then kind of list off the rest of them. But there's a scene where the wives of the hikers again, Jenny and Liz and Stacy, they're talking about discussing and planning for the go-go years, the slow-go years and the no-go years. You've heard that before, I'm sure. And they're all excited about travel and other activities in their go-go years. And I always say, yeah, make your bucket list, be motivated. But Liz, who is Jim's wife, and again, Jim's the one who was doing it right, as is Liz. She's been along for the ride all this way. And again, we're showing modeling good behaviors where the husbands and wives work together on these issues so that they understand them. And she's saying, we're also planning ahead for our slow go and no go years. And Jenny and Stacy go, "Oh, really? What are you doing there?" So she goes through the strategies that they're planning ahead for that time of their life. And so that's just, again, telling the important issues in a story format. But the next one is one of my topics that's dear to my heart. And this is one where we're going to show some illustrations from this. So there's a scene where Liz and Jenny is Bob's wife. Bob's the one who is really worried about having enough money, as is Jenny, so they're working together. And they're discussing something we call the widow's money crunch. And here's we're putting this up where they're in the garden, they're in Liz's garden, and Jenny's saying, it's sobering to think we might need to make our money last for 20 to 30 years. And it's really scary if we're the ones who outlive our husbands. And so Liz is saying, well, of course, my mother lived for 8 years after my father passed away. So they're having it's common to be influenced by the stories in your lives. This is back to the stories. And stories are often what's happened to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so Liz is saying that when, with their mother and father, when the father died, their income dropped significantly, but the living expenses didn't drop that much. And that's a very common situation that I've seen happen over and over again. And so that's where Liz says that put her in the widow's money crunch. I wanted to use some visual and memorable phrases here. If you show the next slide in this chapter, then they're just going on what happened, happened to help you stop worrying. Well, it's talking about working with an advisor who came up with a plan. And over, we've seen if you've got a plan that's a solid plan, that makes you worry less. So Liz is saying, well, I'm still worried, but it's not keeping me up at night anymore. And so that's what they've done is they've worked with an advisor to figure out how to make sure their money will last for the rest of their life. If you go to the next one, this is the last one. So there's just three illustrated slides in this one. And so they're just saying we set up personal retirement paychecks that last the rest of my life. And if they only spend the amount of their paychecks, then they won't run out of money in their retirement. And so it's just getting to the core of a retirement income strategy is what I call paycheck replacement, where people, when you think about it, when you're working, you've got these monthly paychecks coming in, and that puts a discipline on you. You can't spend more than those paychecks.
Right.
So let's keep that discipline going in retirement. And that's why I like the paycheck replacement theory.
And for people who look at these panels and then want to know how do we set up a paycheck of our own? I mean, we talk on this show that annuities can be one tool that you can use to do that to guarantee yourself some additional income for the rest of your life. They're making their way into a number of 401k plans at this
Mhm.
point. What other ways might somebody like your characters go about that, and how can they follow the breadcrumbs through your series to figure it out?
Okay, well, that's a good question, which I address is that in another scene, the hikers are still having their coffee, and Jim
They
is
drink a
still,
lot of coffee, Steve,
well,
these hikers.
they do, yeah. And so he's describing the different types of retirement paychecks and their characteristics. So Social Security, for most people, that's the largest and most important paycheck. But then he says, you know, I didn't have enough guaranteed income, so I bought income annuity because I don't have a pension, and a income annuity is the next best thing. Well, this is a common situation. A lot of current people approaching retirement, they don't have those pensions anymore. And so if they want the peace of mind of some kind of lifetime guaranteed income between Social Security and annuity, then that's the way they make that happen. But then they talk about having a variable retirement paycheck, which is investing some money and then drawing it down in a responsible way. So right away, I've got Jim, who's learned from his advisor how to do this, and then he's sharing with his friends how he's done that.
We know that there's a big emotional piece to this, and family dynamics as well. They often drive the decisions that people make as much as the numbers do. How does this series touch on the emotions that we bring into planning for retirement? And what advice does it offer for people who might be struggling to talk with their loved ones, like their kids or their adult older parents?
Well, that's at the heart of what we're trying to accomplish here, because again, emotions can influence you more than just numbers. And so right away on the website, Retirement Illustrated, the home page has Bob and Jenny saying, well, we're worried about our money won't last for life. And I don't want to be poor like Liz's mom was. You know, so they're right away, they're expressing common fears, but also they're talking with each other about it. You know, so just at the basics, getting people to talk with each other and share their concerns, we model that kind of healthy behaviors. And so throughout the whole series, both the hikers, the men, they're talking about what's worrying them with them. The women are talking about what's worrying them. And then we also show, in some cases, the husband and wife coming back and saying, hey, I learned this at the hike. And again, talking with each other. So the advice is talk, talk, talk.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're using these stories because over the years, have been asked a lot of times, how do you get a reluctant parent to open up about their hopes and dreams and finances for retirement? How does a child get the parent to buy into this conversation? And my advice has always been use a story, use if you've got a story of somebody in your life where somebody was widowed or something happened,
Mhm.
use that. If you don't have that, make it up. But this
Yeah.
is this is a nicely packaged story that people could use to tee up those conversations.
Right. And actually, in the series there, you'll see one person talking about, again, Liz's mom, who had that widow's money crunch, and I don't want to end up like her. And then another one is, oh, but my aunt and uncle had a great retirement, and let's learn from them. So it's just portraying that kind of learning and insights. Um, and often breaking the ice is the hardest thing. Having that opening conversation with either your spouse or an adult child, uh, break the ice. It gets easier when once you initiate those conversations.
I think that's absolutely true. It's not a one and done conversation. It's many smaller conversations over a longer period of time. You and I have talked in other settings about the mind shift that happens when you go from accumulating savings to generating income in retirement. We know from Alliance for Lifetime Income research that this is one of the things that
Mhm.
retirees struggle with. In Retirement Illustrated, how do you help the characters and the readers make that mental shift without feeling as if they're stepping off of some sort of money cliff?
Yeah, I get it. You're right about that one. Well, I had some fun with that in chapters 2 and 3. And the hikers are out there hiking, and there's two squirrels that overhear the hikers talking about retirement. So one squirrel says to another, well, what's retirement? And again, there's a smarter squirrel that says, well, you save enough nuts so you don't have to hunt for nuts for the rest of your life. And the other squirrel says, well, I like the sound of that. How many nuts do you think I should save? And the squirrel does a little mental math and he goes, oh, I think you need to save about 33,000 nuts. Um, and actually, Gene, I had to research how long squirrels live to come up with that number.
Wow.
Um, and so then just by coincidence, Bob is hiking along and he asks Jim how much money he needs to retire. And Bob says, that's the wrong question to ask. And instead says, you need to ask how much income you'll have. And leads right away to what I call the common sense formula for retirement security is I greater than E. Income is greater than living expenses. And so there's just an example of a story and using some humor and getting them in right away is that, uh, when you're saving, you're focused on the number. But really, when you get to retirement, you need to make sure you have enough income, regular income to cover your living expenses. And that's probably the most important mind shift to go through.
A lot of our viewers and a lot of people in general feel pretty far behind when it comes to saving for retirement. And when you're behind in saving, it's hard to generate enough income. In fact, the research shows that more than half of baby boomers and Gen Xers are fearful of outliving their savings.
Mhm.
Based on the information in Retirement Illustrated, what does a realistic strategy look like for someone like that? Someone who fears that they aren't where they should be.
Well, Gene, that's another topic near to my heart because, again, at the Stanford Center on Longevity, we saw statistics on the amounts of retirement savings that a lot of people have accumulated, people in their late 50s and early 60s. And I had come to this conclusion that the majority of people don't have enough money to retire full time at age 65 and replace their standard of living. The numbers just don't work. And that's the basic dilemma that a lot of people are facing. And so, really, to address that, when I said they they can't retire at age 65 full time, either you're going to need to work longer or spend less money in retirement or some combination. And that is the hard reality that a lot of people are facing. And I think the sooner you understand that and face up to that, the more you can start strategizing about what you're going to do. And so in Retirement Illustrated, there's a chapter that's I've already specced out and it's being illustrated. It's in chapter 25, which is going to publish in January. Bob and Jenny, they were the ones that were worried about did they have enough money, and they're meeting with a retirement advisor. And I do talk about meeting with advisors because most of these concepts are just beyond the expertise or experience of most people. And so
Mhm.
I really stress, finding a qualified retirement advisor that has your best interest at heart is almost essential.
We
So,
Oh,
Go
continue,
ahead.
please. No, 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 it's okay.
Well, so Bob and Jenny are meeting with his advisor, and they say they're worried about outliving their money. And the advisor says, "Well, worry is not a plan, but you'll feel better with the plan." And so then they go through the plan, and they devise a strategy that I like a lot, which is semi-retirement. You work maybe part-time for a while and delay taking your Social Security and let your savings grow longer. And if you're working part-time, at least you are kind of part-time retired too, and you enjoy life more. So I think that's a strategy a lot of people ought to consider. And actually, that's what we've been doing. So I introduced that strategy in the Retirement Illustrated.
When it comes to those conversations with financial professionals, sometimes there are big gaps in knowledge. Often in not just in knowledge, but in language, in experience between financial professionals and their clients, and sometimes the conversation gets a little bit muddy. Is there a way to use Retirement Illustrated as a tool for financial planners and financial professionals?
I hope so. And that was one of my target audiences is that there are a couple things they can do. First of all, it goes through all these different decisions so that their clients are more informed. And I always say that if you work with an advisor, you still want to inform yourself so you can have a knowledgeable conversation and kick things around. And so Retirement Illustrated can help inform people, particularly visual learners who might not read text, but also about the emotions and modeling how they're describing their emotions. Hopefully, that can get the advisors and their clients talking about the emotions they're feeling. I can imagine advisors also just not comfortable with saying, what are you worried about? The emotions could feel uncomfortable for them. And so I'm hoping we can kickstart those conversations so that the advisor understands how their clients are feeling and also understand any misconceptions they might have. Because that's what I've found is that some people have the wrong story in their head, and it kind of leads them to decisions that might not be optimal for them.
I actually love that you've let these chapters unfold sort of naturally. You're not throwing them out there all at once. You've introduced them over time. You're continuing to work on others. But if somebody following this conversation goes to your website, takes a look, do you want them to go through all of it? Do you want them to parse it out? What's the best way to take the lessons in without getting overloaded?
Well, actually, there are a couple different ways that readers can use Retirement Illustrated. And one way is just on the website, which is retirementillustrated.com. Um, there's a chapters page, and it just has the first illustration of each chapter. And so they can just skim through that. It actually is a visual table of contents. And most of the first illustrations actually show what the topic is of that chapter. So in under 5 minutes, you can, maybe 10 minutes, but 5 to 10 minutes, they can digest what's in that table of contents. And then if that's the point, they can click on a chapter that interests them. And if they really get interested, they can click on the links that follow. Um, but the other one that I like is that it could also be a step-by-step tutorial because you're
Mm,
right. I did take out the ideas in sequence. They're not, a lot of books will have a section just on money and just on health, and they've kind of cram it all together. But what I've done, and is more realistic, is that you're learning, it goes in fits and starts, and you focus on one topic for a while and then another topic. And so you see the hikers talking about what's worried to them, but then you see the wives talking about something else. And so it kind of, there's this path that you go through that's always not always a straight line. And
just
so
like life.
precisely that's what we're trying to show. And so the you could just use it as a step-by-step tutorial where you just take one chapter, read all the links, and then if you're working with an advisor, talk about them, but also take time to see how you're going to integrate the insights into your planning. Because often it's just not all of a sudden at once you get this brainstorm and say, aha, this is how it's going to be. You need to just think about it for a while. And so
So
they
the
could just go step by step and use it as a tutorial.
The website is retirementillustrated.com. Is that the best place to go? Is there anywhere else that we should be looking for this information?
At the moment, it's the only place to go.
Amazing.
Yeah. Although I've got a newsletter that comes out every 2 or 3 weeks with a new chapter. So if you didn't want to wait for it to be published on the new website, you could sign up for the newsletter.
That
Um, you
sounds like
know,
a good idea too.
Eventually, we're probably going to assemble this into a book, but right now we're just wanting to get it out and see how people respond to it and just put it out in the world.
That sounds great. Steve, you know that we like to wrap these conversations by asking our guest for just a couple of pieces of advice, 2 to 3, for people who are 5 to 10 years out from retirement. What should they be doing right now in order to plan for what comes next?
Okay, well, you said 3 pieces of advice. Well, first, if you're 5 to 10 years out, start your planning and your envisioning now, because a lot of people wait till like a year or two out before they even start thinking about it. So start it now. And if you're married, involve your spouse, your partner. Uh, Start talking with your friends who are in the same situation. But it's important to realize your retirement could last 20 to 30 years. And that's another realization. You need to make your money last for that period of time, but also, what are you going to do with all this time? And so I like to say, start the bucket list. At least that motivates you and gets you excited. And then you think, if I've got the bucket list, I need to have enough money to support that bucket list. So that's the first thing. Start planning now. But then once you get motivated, the second thing would be to pick an age that you think you might want to retire and do the math. You probably need an advisor for that to see how much money you might get, how much retirement income you might get at that age. And if you realize, like I said, you can't retire full time at 65 and have your current standard of living, then you're going to have to either work longer or reduce your spending. These are powerful and important decisions, and you start going down that path. So that would be the second piece of advice. And then the last one, the third one, is to think about where you'll live, because what I've found is that, and the research I've seen at Stanford, is that that can have a powerful impact on your quality of life, your financial life, but yet it's the most overlooked decision. And most people just by default stay where they are, where they raise their family or they commute to work or whatever. So that's the third one. So I went into some detail, but those are the
No,
pieces of advice
those
I'd
are
have.
perfect. Retirement expert Steve Vernon. The website is retirementillustrated.com. I hope everyone will check it out. Thank you so much for being here back with us once again.
Gene, thanks for having me.
And if you're approaching retirement and you're looking for more advice on the big decisions that lie ahead, make sure that you check out the resources available on our website. It's protectedincome.org. Thanks for watching, everyone. We will see you next time.